Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the virtual workshop titled Agroecology and Safe Food System Transitions for Green, Resilient and Inclusive Recovery in the ASEAN region. My name is Ila and I will be your technical facilitator today. For assistance, please use the chat function to message anyone with the title Technical Facilitator in their name. Before we get started, I have a few technical notes to explain. If you would like to contribute a perspective, idea, or thought, please use the chat function. If you would like to ask a question, please use the Q&A button. You can find both of these features at the bottom of your Zoom window. Please note that this session will be recorded for documentation purposes. We are also streaming live on Facebook to reach a larger audience. For those of you just joining us, welcome and thank you for attending today's workshop. I will now pass the floor to Dr. Pascal Lienard. Dr. Pascal, the floor is now yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Ila. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning for those participants who are in Europe. Welcome to this session on climate actions, monitoring and financing. So my name is Pascal Lienard. I'm an agronomist and a researcher at CIRAD, which is a French agricultural research center for agricultural development. And I'm really pleased and honored to facilitate this session with my colleague Cornelia Et from the University of Bern Center for Development and Environment. So before starting, just to remind you the objective of this session. So we'll try to provide an overview of urgent issues related to climate change in the Mekong region. Also try to provide insights on key initiatives that are addressing various aspects of climate smart agriculture and carbon monitoring and financial mechanism. And we will try to end to discuss potential concrete linkages between these different initiatives in order to scale up climate smart agriculture initiative. So the session will be organized in 4 sequences. So we will have a first sequence, the first opening session that would set the scene and remind us about the issues and challenges related to climate change in the region. Then we will have a first sequence on climate smart agriculture technologies and approaches with 3 different speakers. Then the second one, more specifically on carbon and environmental services monitoring and funding mechanism, with also 3 presentations and 3 speakers. And finally, a panel discussion with 4 different panelists to discuss the priority actions and potential synergy for scaling up climate smart action in the region, which is quite important, especially in the context of the COP26 right now operating in Glasgow. Before starting, as mentioned by Ila, I would like to remind our speakers to please keep the time so that we can save time for question exchanges and also to finish on time at 4 p.m. As we will have the global wrap-up of the workshop. For all participants, please do not hesitate to ask questions, to put the question on the Q&A chat. Try also to be concise and specific in your question and also to indicate to which speaker the question is for. So that we can be sure that one of them can respond to you correctly. So I propose to start right now with our first opening speech. So we will have the first presentation by Miss Aneta Nikolova. Entitled is 1.5 degrees Celsius within reach for the Asia Pacific region. So Miss Nicoleta is the leader of the ESCAP climate action team with a special focus on climate finance, enhancing implementation and reporting to Paris Agreement, and also trying to review and support the implementation of national determined contribution. So Miss Aneta, please, the floor is yours. You have 15 minutes.
Thank you very much, Pascal. And I'm very happy to be here and would like to really dive directly into the issues. So This presentation is based on the research that we've done for the last year with a whole big team from ESCAP, UN Women, UNEP, and a think tank from Germany, the Green Work. And we looked at all the NDC commitments, but we also looked deeper. So next slide, please. I would like to tell you, just to remind all of us, we are experiencing the most severe existential crisis of our times, and we've caused it. It's anthropogenic, and we've made it. And so the challenges of COVID pandemic are also exacerbating that. Next slide, please. And if we dwell on the climate issues, we would like to, with our study, we looked at this. What are the countries doing in our region? Are they doing enough that we can keep the world within 1.5 degrees? Why it is important to look at the Asia Pacific region? We have 2/3 of the world population, enormous appetite for growth. It is not really a low carbon growth, despite of the efforts of the last years. We see on this slide the projections and the growth of emissions. We also know that 7 of the G20 countries from our region are contributing over 50% of the global emissions. 10 top countries emitters from our region are having the greatest historical responsibility for the emissions from the beginning of the 20th century. And this is important. It means our region, whatever our region would do, would drive the global climate transformation. Next slide, please. Now, at the corner, please, you could click a little bit more because there's some animations. Yes, thank you. This, and I would like to excuse myself, the slides may not allow to really very well see this graphs, but you could also go to the report and you will see at the end the link to it. Important thing is that the recommendations of the International Panel on Climate Change are to reduce 45% of our emissions by 2030 compared to 2010 levels. And our region is not complying with that. On the contrary, this scenario shows you we are on the path of growth of emissions. Very little is done to reduce this by 2030. So we have very low start for 2050, 60. We've increasing threefold the recommended threshold for that year of 2030. And that is equal to 34% of growth from 2010 levels. Next slide, please. So when we dive deeper to the NDC commitments for reductions, we see that as a total, it's not sufficient, and we really need to do more. Now, okay, this is all not very happy picture. Why is it like that? Next slide, please. Is because countries have not, no, I think you have to go one slide earlier. Okay, sorry. Okay, let's go to the ASEAN region now, please. Next slide, please. Sorry. This map shows you the commitments from the ASEAN member states, and these are quite insufficient as well. If we look at it, some of the countries are even going to have real growth by 2030. Some of the countries will have 3-4 folds of their current emission in 2020. And next slide, please. That is having a huge impact on the Southeast Asia region. I could have provided another slide with a lot of images of droughts and floods that are happening at the moment. And we see that this is really a situation of dire climate impact, of a very erratic climate and weather patterns, and the sea levels are rising. But that is also impacting the food security of our region. And this region is important producer of food. Southeast Asia is supplying the food actually to quite a number of global countries. So what could be done for our region, for the Southeast Asian region or ASEAN? Next slide, please. Here we come to one extremely important solution, that is climate smart agriculture. Climate smart agriculture has the potential to increase the adaptability and mitigation efforts of the countries. Why? Because one of the biggest carbon sink are our soils. So what can we do with that? There is an opportunity there. And there are a couple of policy measures that could be combined, putting a carbon price and evaluating the efforts of putting the carbon back into the soils. So we're taking out all artificial fertilizers, but we're using natural sources, and we are putting carbon back into soils. We are also doing a lot of organic and smart agriculture with planting more trees. So we have more opportunities for increasing forest coverage and increasing the carbon capture. And we are going to increase the value of the productivity, agricultural productivity here. And that is going to be important for more investments further. Now, how this could be supported further. Next slide, please. In our report, we looked at an opportunity for countries to develop a mutually reinforcing enabling framework and where they are standing on that. So this framework has three very interconnected elements: raising ambition factors, enabling factors, and gender mainstreaming, since gender is an important element. And we looked at the raising ambition factors in several areas. What are the number of neutrality pledges, carbon pledges? How high are the targets for GHG emission reductions? What is the level of decarbonization of different sectors? Electricity, coal freeze, having also renewable energy increase. Our Southeast Asia, it has the greatest potential for renewable energies, one of the highest use of carbon pricing and fossil fuel subsidy reform. We also looked at the enabling factors, which are in 4 categories: mainstreaming climate change in policies and laws, horizontal and vertical integration, which means what? How are the ministries working between each other together to support NDC implementation? How are the local governments involved to support NDC implementation, commitments implementation? Also, climate finance readiness. What is the level of budget allocations for NDC implementation in sectoral ministries? Is it sufficient? How are the banks involved? How are different inventors, venture capitalists, private sector involved? And then the final is the transparency. What kind of monitoring, review, reporting and evaluation systems exist, which are the pillar of the Paris Agreement of the transparency framework and a prerequisite for financing, for getting more finances. So about the integration of gender equality and human rights-based approaches in climate action is super important, because especially related to climate smart agriculture, where the most vulnerable could have opportunities to be engaged, because this will help also for adaptation and for food production and security. Next slide, please. So how are the countries scoring into this? Please, can you click one more time? Yes, on this graph, you will see that in terms of raising ambition, our region has shown that most of the countries are in the emerging slowly group. And members of the ASEAN are also belonging to that. Also, we've seen that high ambition is not confined only to higher income countries. Bhutan, Kazakhstan are striving for the best. We see them on the top among countries like Republic of Korea, Japan, New Zealand. Next slide, please. Similar result we are getting when we look at the development of the enabling frameworks. And we see here as well, and we are very happy to see that our countries in ASEAN are scoring very high on this scoring assessment. Vietnam is ranked as the most effective with its enabling framework. Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia are there. They're very capable, high in the capable group. This is a very good sign. This means that the countries in ASEAN can really, they have the prerequisite and opportunities to raise their ambition. They just have to really come over the crisis with the COVID and unite green COVID strategies with low emission development. However, most of the countries are having low developed monitoring, reporting, verification systems. As I said, these are extremely important for the future investments, and they're the pillar of the Paris Agreement. Next slide, please. When we look at the gender integration, as I said, gender integration is fully aligned with human rights and of taking care of the most vulnerable in society. So it is not only important for engagement of women, it actually shows how the society is involved in NDC implementation. And we know that the recommendation from the team in UNFCCC is that the updated NDCs need to cover more that issue that is super important and is a prerequisite for really inclusive commitments to climate action. We see that countries like the Philippines, Cambodia are really ranking very high, and the others from the ASEAN is kind of in the middle, and this is a very positive sign. There is one slide that is missing from here, and I would like to mention here, based on the factors we saw in slide 6 and 7, we've developed a composite index for all the countries where we have seen that there is a strife in the region. Income is not important. We have action both on the high income and the low income, but we see countries like Solomon Islands, Kazakhstan, Republic of Korea that have not waited for things to happen from outside. And so that's a very good lesson to learn in ASEAN. We should stop saying we need more funding and technologies. We can do it here. ASEAN region is genuine, and there's this framework for cooperation and for exchange of experiences. And we've worked with the ASEAN Climate Working Group on carbon pricing. There's big interest of using it. Also, is spilling over to the ASEAN Energy Working Group. So it is an opportunity that is important. Also, when we look at the agriculture issue, it is important to look at carbon capture practices, because capturing the carbon and making it into fertilizer, which is organic, and spurring growth, greening of the agriculture, and giving us higher nutrition food produce is very important for the ASEAN region. Okay, so when we go to the next slide, what needs to be done regionally? First and most important is commit to what is already there in the NDC commitments, targets, and implement it. That is very important. Second is align the post-COVID recovery with greener practices, with NDC strategies, NDC targets. It's very important, and supporting SDGs and green growth strategies. Develop low carbon, long-term low carbon, low GHG emissions development strategies. These are helping to get a better perspective of what is available at home, what is the human potential, where the efforts should go. Introduce carbon pricing, very important. Carbon pricing can help for many things: for fossil fuels subsidy reform, for developing ETS systems, emissions trading systems, for attracting investments into nature-based solutions, which is also very important for adaptation and mitigation, for debt swaps for climate action. So multiple purposes. For bonds, we need to have a price, right, to back it up with the financial instruments. Key for ASEAN is freeze coal, focus on renewable energies. There is a huge potential if we take half of the fossil fuel subsidies and slowly phase them out, we will be able to finance that transition. Then enhance the monitoring, reporting, and verification system, not only at the national level, but also at the enterprise level, so they can get financial support for low carbon measures. And share experiences, engage with each other, and also engage the private sector, the local communities, the local government. That is very important. The next slide shows you the report where you can find it. And I would like to thank you for listening to this presentation, and looking forward to your comments and questions.
And thank you very much, Ms. Aneta, for setting the scene so nicely, and also for providing already areas of what could be done and should be done in the region. And that's specifically a nice transition also to introduce what will come next in the next sequence, especially related to climate smart agriculture initiative, and also all the things related to how to better link farmers to carbon and to carbon markets. I propose that we move on to the second one, and that we may take also a question for Aneta during this sequence on climate smart agriculture. Anyway, we are pleased to have you again during the panel discussion. So I propose to move on to the part one on climate smart agriculture. So we will have for this sequence 3 presentations from 4 different speakers. So the first one will be Mr. Pi Chin from the General Directorate of Agriculture, Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry and Fisheries. So Mr. Pi Chin is involved in is the focal point in Cambodia also for the Global Soil Partnership and for the ASEAN project. So he will be presenting a speech on conservation agriculture in Cambodia. Then we will have a 2-voice presentation done by Dr. Tatenda Lehmann and Dr. Cornelia Ed, who are both senior research scientists at the University of Bern within the Center for Development and Environment. So Dr. Tatenda is a member of the VOCAT executive team and is specialized in hydrological modeling, soil and water conservation, sustainable land management, and climate change mitigation and adaptation. While Dr. Cornelia Ed is conducting transformational research on pathway towards agroecological transition. And then we will have a presentation by Mr. Anshuman Varma, who is currently the deputy head of the Center for Sustainable Agricultural Mechanization, CESAM, of United Nations ESCAP, and who is overseeing a large range of programs related to sustainable agricultural mechanization in the region. So I propose to move directly to the presentation from Mr. Pi Chin. So please, Pi Chin, thank you to turn on your camera, and the floor is yours for 15 minutes.
Thank you very much, Pascal, for the introduction. Yes, would like to say good morning and good afternoon to ladies and gentlemen. My name is Pi Chin. Yeah, here now, my colleague Florent Chivet and I are invited to share with you what is the conservation agriculture in Cambodia. We can contribute to the carbon capturing aspects in Cambodia. Okay, please, next. We would like to introduce what is the current land use in Cambodia, as we have seen that the direction of the cultivated areas for agriculture is increased year by year, and what if we see that the low productivity both in upland and lowland is because of the low level of the crop diversification. Also, that the aspect to be improved. Now, Cambodia, we have to more diversify some practices like the conservation agriculture, such as no-tills, liquid-based crop diversification, that is tend to increase the soil organic carbon, soil health, and other ecological transition. Next, please. We are now using on the different type of soils in Cambodia are the classified with the vulnerable to erosion, as we mentioned in this map. is classified by the three categories. You see that the 0.5 million hectare are the high vulnerables to erosion, and moderately are 7.6, and more prevalent is the low to non-erosion in Cambodia, as seen in the yellow greens. We now use on the agriculture is basically our farmer have used more on the degraded lands and poor diversify and poor management practices. That is our concern in nowadays. If we count it 6.3 million Cambodian was earned from the degraded agricultural lands, as a quote in 2010s. And if we count the cost is 677 millions, equivalent to 3% of the GDPs at the UNCCD's quoted. Next, please. What is the change from the history for conservation agriculture to agroecology in nowadays? We have more than one decade history since 2004 that we started conducting research for development, since the try to make a pilot on the rubber plantation, we incorporate with the cover crops, and then we moderate more research and development capacity building until to now we try to diversify with other sector to integrate and work together, such as service providers and private sector and other development partner. That is now we still on the doing agroecology and safe food transition in the Southeast Asia, such as Portfolio and ASEAN and others models such as Mexico. It is very integrated to together and promote agroecology in Cambodia. Next, please. And another three click maybe, yeah. We have in 2010 area in Cambodia, as mentioned, it is map. Initially is Boknok CA station. Is very foremost to integrate with the research and development for conservation agriculture, and now we are trying to incorporate with other partner and to develop more research and development, and for long-term experiment have been conducted in 2004, and we try to move forward to other area like irrigated scheme in the sandy soil in Kampong Thom province, and also we start to integrate in the organic rice in upland area in Prefecture province called Ruvian, and also we integrated with vegetable production in sandy soil in the Siem Reap, and also we integrated other area in Battambang province as a upland farming that is very inclusive to modify with agroecology, and also floodplain area as integrated with the rice ecosystem to promote these technologies. Next, please. So now we are reached on the research and enabling environment to engage the public-private sector to reward the farmer for the carbon. That is, we try to estimate the carbon stocks and the potential benefits. We have intervention and interact with the impact of land use change and practices on the scope of asset projects nowadays. And also we have the integrated and cooperate with the global soil partnership to integrate the soil information database, and also we try to integrate the connection with the global soil partnership through the using the high technology for carbon mapping, like the mid-infrared spectroscopy. Yes, and also we have to develop the adept management practices like conservation agriculture, like agroecology system, crop management, IPM, horticulture, and under the aspect of conservation agriculture. And also we try to integrate with the tree and intercrop crop management. We also define and strengthening the environment through the education, extension, and policy dialogues. Here we have the extension model like Mexico, and have policy dialogues for the sustainable development that in the framework of NCSD to NDC. And we also looking for the carbon market based on our long and short-term experiments and on farm networks. And we also have to monitor the change and low cost time bond indicator as well. Next, please. We have the carbon stock estimation in the course of assessing, like some paper we have published for the soil organic carbon dynamics and modeling in the carbon impact and the CH, and also we have assessing carbon dynamic and soil ecosystem service. These are the primary to indicate the carbon stocks in the soils. And we also assessing the trade-off between soil organic carbon sequestration and greenhouse gas emission as well. And also we evaluate more the early effect of CA on carbon carbon stocks, pool, and ecosystem services. Next, please. What we Cambodian have contributed to the Global Soil Partnership Platform. In the case, we have developed soil organic carbon map that we also integrated the Global Soil Partnership, and also we have submitted and integrated already. And we have developed the soil resources in WRB unit, and we have developed some soil affected soils for the Global Soil Partnership. And in now we are developing the soil carbon sequestration with the ROTC model, and the first version was finalized and the second version were on progressing. Next, please. Here, what is I mentioned is the development of the soils infrared calibration with infrared spectroscopy. Now we are trying to collecting all more sample around the country, and we try to collaborate, and then we have process to monitor. Next, please. So as I mentioned, is the development of CA-based management practices since 2004, and now in 2020 and 21, if we are toward to free pesticide practices under CA and Agroecology. Please, next. And in the connection with the education and the other networks, we have the 5-year strategic plan for national and regional training center, CESI, and Agroecology. They call it Bac Nau in Kampong Cham province. It's a very intensive for the support the farmers, and also other stakeholders like students can come to research and conduct experiment in there. And a strong partnership for agronomists, research institute, and higher education and NGO as well. CSN is another excellent center for the contributing to the agroecology as well. And also we have ties with the ASEAN and LAC as well. Next, please. I would like to quote with the key takeaways that we as Cambodia have very strong commitment to go straight forward to develop further resource and information to integrate with the national and international platform for sustainable use and harmonies and horizontal networks. With the capacity building is very intensive, very crucial. At the Boknau, the training center is have developing on CA and agroecology. We have setting up now the 5-year strategic plans and exploring business models for facilitate access to seed of cover crops and mechanization, and we try to exploring the final mechanism to support farmer investment in soil fertility restoration. That is all the activity that we have done and doing on the ground, and and uh, and the, and the cooperation under the many stakeholder and partner to cooperate in the agroecology and food transition in Cambodia. Well, thank you very much. I have to end my talk here.
Thank you very much, Pichi, for this nice overview of what is happening in Cambodia at the moment, and it looks really promising. I would like now to invite our two next speakers to turn on the camera. So please, Dr. Tatenda and Dr. Cornelia, the floor is yours for 15 minutes.
So good afternoon or good morning, everybody. Actually, in Switzerland, it's quite early and I could not test my voice so far, and it still seems to be a bit bruised. Sorry for that. But thanks a lot for this nice introduction, for this very impressive speak on a more local level, on a more national level before. And now I would like to open up a bit to a more global database and topic before we then get back to some more concrete actions from the ground from Laos and Cambodia with my colleague Cornelia Het. Next slide, please. So just as mentioned before, if you have questions, please, I think you can post into the chat, or we can discuss it later in the panel session. And if something is not clear or too fast presented, you always can find more information, details on the links in the presentation, I think, which will be distributed to all of you. Yes, WCAT, the World Overview of Conservation Approaches and Technologies, was established soon 30 years ago after the Rio Convention in 1992. So there are so many projects generating a lot of knowledge and good practices on sustainable land management. But after the projects end, all this information often gets lost in bookshelves or just locally stored in folders somewhere in the cloud. And that is what WCAT wants to change. Collecting knowledge, experience, expertise on sustainable land management and make it available for others. And these efforts led to a still increasing number of sustainable land management specialists, culminated in being officially recognized by the UNCCD as the primary global SLM database for SLM best practices. So today, WCAT legally bases on a consortium agreement with 7 consortium partners, which you can see listed here on the right. And the core mandate is funded mainly by Switzerland and Germany. And now with our new strategy, WCAT 2020 Plus, we are establishing as well 6 regional clusters to enhance regional capacities and also to strengthen South-South collaboration. Next slide, please. And now very short, I would like to give you an overview on our 4 main pillars through which we are supporting innovation and decision-making in sustainable land management. So first, on top, the global open sustainable network, which I just mentioned before, with many engaged individuals and institutions from more than 50 countries. And second, on the right, the open access global sustainable land management database, which contains a series of standardized tools and methods for knowledge management, decision support in sustainable land management. You will get an insight into that in a few minutes. And related to that, the third pillar on the left, where we are harmonizing and further developing the tools and methods we are working with. So it is incredible how many new databases and tools pop up around the globe every year, month, or even weekly. And here our intention is not that everybody is using WCAT, but that wherever possible, existing tools are being considered and linked to not reinvent the wheel again and again, and to also make the life of users and projects as easy as possible. And finally, of course, very important, the capacity building pillar, where WCAT is supporting projects and institutions to build their capacities in assessment of land degradation and the evaluation of potential sustainable land management solutions. So Cornelia will give you some more information from projects on the ground in Cambodia and Laos in a few minutes. Next slide, please. But why does sustainable land management matters? So SLM represents a more holistic approach to preserving the vital functions and services by land. So sustainable land management provides appropriate land-based solutions to address various threats by integrating actually all sustainable dimensions. And therefore, sustainable land management supports the objectives of all three Rio Conventions, as well as several sustainable development goals, which you can see on the right here. But next slide, please. Now let's get back to the core of WCAT. Beside the network, the Global Sustainable Land Management Database. So weekly, we get new documented practices, and the database is being used by different stakeholders around the globe, as you can see on the maps below. So today we have more than 2,000 peer-reviewed and field-tested sustainable land management practices. So and from Cambodia, as an example, currently we have 42 technologies, Laos, 22, just give you some examples. And they can be consulted in the design of sustainable land management or even landscape interventions. And the filter and the visualization tool helps to find relevant sustainable land management practices for specific land uses or whole ecosystems. But you can not only find the practices, it also allows programs, projects, or even individuals to upload their good practices and to share them worldwide. And they also be shared through an application program interface or API. And through that, the database can be linked with other databases, platforms, applications, which you also can see with some examples in one of the next slides. Next slide, please. So the database automatically generates a summary of all the technologies and approaches with first general information, what is the technology about, how it is being implemented, information about where is it being implemented, what are the local conditions and how much the implementation, but also the maintenance costs, and very important, on the benefits and the impacts of all sustainable dimension on site, as we have heard before, just as an example, soil erosion or yield, but also off-site like floodings, carbon emissions, sequestration, and so on. So these summaries can be used for good practice compilations, learning materials, for extension service or knowledge products. And next slide, please, because on the next slide, you can see some examples of knowledge products based on the WCAT database entries. Here on top, some good practice compilations for whole regions, as an example, whole sub-Saharan Africa, but also for the whole dryland as a topic. And below, some national good practice compilations, as an example, from Philippines, Cambodia, Laos, or Thailand. So these publications can, like all other WCAT publications, by the way, are open accessible and can be found on our website. Next slide, please. But as I just mentioned before, all the information is not only available through the PDFs, it also can be accessed through the application program interface. That also allows program platforms, tools to access to the WCAT database to download, but also to upload new information technologies. But for those of you who are a bit less into codes and programming, we also offer a dashboard where you easily can filter and analyze and download data from the database. And the new edition should be available within the next few weeks. Next slide. And I would like to give you a very short overview of linked tools, application, databases, but we do not have the time to go into detail here. And you can find all the links and the tools and platforms listed on this slide. But I would like to give you 2 examples. And next slide, please. The first is the firm. So as WOCAT is an official supporting partner of the UN Decade on ecosystem restoration, their database, the firm, the framework for ecosystem monitoring, is linked with WOCAT. And that allows users to find concrete sustainable land management examples, which can be implemented in each of the 8 UN Decade ecosystems. And you can see here also examples of these technologies can be found in the publication, which was launched recently together with the UNCCD. And next slide. Another example is the linkage, again, exactly, of WOCAT and the Carbon Benefit Project tool. And that might be interesting from many of the participants here, but because that allows users to estimate the carbon benefits of single documented technologies or whole projects. So the results, sorry, yes, I'm still on this slide. Because the tools allows you to compare different scenarios. And here you can see, as an example, it's usually, as I said, the business as usual scenario compared with the project scenario. And the results are then being shows all different greenhouse gas emissions, your stocks, your sources, for your baseline scenario, for project scenario, but of course also then the differences, which is then the carbon benefits of the tool. But let me briefly show you how this linkage is working in the next slide. Only short, going to 4 steps. So the first step on the next slide is documentation of the technology, which I've just seen with WOCAT, including the whole WOCAT review process. And step 2, then the import of the WOCAT database to the Carbon Benefit Project tools, where part of the questionnaire automatically will be filled with the information from WOCAT, so you don't have to enter the same information twice. And in step 3, the greenhouse gas estimation with the Carbon Benefit Project, where you estimate, as I just said, the sink sources of the business as usual and the project scenario. Then this also then includes a review system which is provided by the Colorado State University, the developers of the CBP tool. And finally, step 4, the upload of the CBP summary to the WOCAT database. Next slide. And therefore, we have implemented a new module in our WOCAT database where the reviewed sustainable carbon benefit project summary can be uploaded to the WOCAT. And this report is actually an 8-page PDF summary in a standard 8 format, including tables showing all your different greenhouse gas emissions, stocks, sources for the different scenarios, and of course, the benefit for the whole project. But now I would like to hand over to Cornelia, who will give us some more concrete information about experience from Laos and Cambodia. Over to you, Cornelia. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tatenda, for this overview of what WOCAT is, a set of tools, a global database, and a network embedded into international processes and bodies. Coming back to the region, between 2016 and 2020, we had the opportunity to promote and embed WOCAT into extension services and research institutions in Laos and Cambodia. Through a project financed by IFAD and linked to IFAD loan investments to enhance country operations and to embed sustainable land management tools and methodologies into existing extension services. So our objective was to create a batch of extension workers who acknowledge local sustainable land management technologies and are capable of using the WOCAT tools suite to document these technologies, and at the same time become promoters of locally created and context-sensitive sustainable land management technologies. So our project built capacities of extension services to use established WCAT tools and methods, to manage them, but also, and I think most importantly, to add to Tatenda's presentation, to become familiarized with this decision support tool that WCAT also provides, and then also to become decision support managers or brokers, if you want to say. And it's this decision support that I'd like to emphasize here. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we started out creating strategic partnerships. In Cambodia, we partnered with the Royal University of Agriculture, RUA, and also, of course, then had the link to GDA. And in Laos, we partnered with the National Agriculture and Forest Research Institute, NAFRI. We then conducted trainings of trainers for how to document sustainable land management using WCAT tools. As a first step, we also translated everything into Lao and into Khmer language. And then we collected a series of technologies and used then those collected technologies to engage with local farmers and extension service officers to discuss on what such SLM technologies farmers would like to and would be interested to test and apply and also get support for. So this was very much a deliberative process and engagement with farmers and extension service officers. So we provided training of trainers for how to conduct such a decision support for SLM with students and extension officers. We built curricula. And what was really interesting in this whole process was that such an engagement process between extension officers and farmers was kind of a novelty. So that there is room for discussion and debate, and that it's not a top-down instruction from extension officers to farmers. And it was a very good experience for all participants, and provided for a stable and cooperative environment to engage and jointly define and implement sustainable land management pathways. Next slide, please. I'd just like to zoom in into one of the most popular SLM technologies that we documented. As you can see here, it's about rice straw mulching in vegetable home gardens. This example here is from Laos, and just showing this to you here also that you can see a little bit more how the documentation works. So we always put a photo, then we have these different benefits, as Tatenda mentioned already. And usually we encourage also to have some sort of a technical drawing. So you can see this one here is quite elaborate. And I think this technology is interesting in various aspects. First of all, it can be viewed from many different viewing angles, from a degradation prevention lens. So then the focus is on improving cover, or you can look at it as a climate smart agricultural lens, or also from an agroecology lens. And I think this is also something that's very dear to our heart at WCAT, is that we should not try to think in silos in these different disciplines, but that we should look at where are there synergies, where do we actually talk about similar things through different lenses. So you can basically read up on these technologies online. What I'd like to highlight here is really that we are very conscious about also indicating construction and initiation costs. So for this technology, for a farmer, it's about $33 US. And then we also look at maintenance cost for this technology. Next slide, please. So through our project in Cambodia and Laos, and by the way, also we were engaged in Uganda outside of the region, we were able to build several sustainable land management demonstration sites also in Laos. As you can see here on this slide, we were active in 5 provinces, in Salavan province, Sekong province, and Attapeu, 3 provinces and 5 districts. So we established test plots and demonstration sites. We also organized farmer-to-farmer exchanges. and we initiated instructional videos, and we adapted also to local ways of transmitting knowledge. So, for example, we used the village loudspeakers to promote such farmer-to-farmer exchanges, or also the sustainable land management practices themselves. And finally, we were able also to get up to the higher level, to the national level, providing policy support for sustainable land management. Next slide, please. So very finally, we supported these two countries, Laos and Cambodia, to establish their own sustainable land management database through using this API that Tatenda mentioned. So basically, Laos and Cambodia both now have their own portals. In Cambodia, a lot is done via Facebook. In Laos, it's more through a web page that has been put up by NAFRI, and these pages then are linked to the global WCAT database. But they are managed locally by representatives within the countries. Next slide, please. And with this very quick insight to some examples of Cambodia and Laos, I would like to come back to the key takeaway messages that Tatenda and I put together. So we really think that farmers and the agricultural extension services are key agents of change for furthering sustainable land management, agroecological practices, climate smart agriculture. And that we have to try to find ways to mobilize them, encourage them also to take decisions, take some risks, and embark on this transition towards sustainability. Context matters, so bottom-up approaches are very important, and if we can link these into global processes, I think that's a very promising approach to take in order to get the linkages to the global discourses, to the global level, to also exchange between countries and for scaling up. And finally, we believe that standardization and harmonization to document good practices of sustainable land management is very much needed, and we are happy that WCAT offers such tools, and we would be happy to explore also further avenues with you guys of how to collaborate. Thank you very much for listening. We are at the end of our presentation.
Thanks a lot, Tatenda and Cornelia, for this nice presentation of the WCAT database and platform, and how this data could also be used at the ground by extension agent. I would like now to invite Mr. Anshuman Varma for the last presentation of this session, on this sub-session, on alternatives to rice straw burning. Mr. Anshuman, the floor is yours, 15 minutes.
Thank you, Pascal. Very good morning, good afternoon to everyone in the audience. I will be talking on the topic of alternatives to rice straw burning. And I think this links quite nicely with the previous presentations on conservation approaches, and also this brief reference to rice straw mulching in Dr. Cornelia's previous presentation. So just another recap. So I'm the deputy head of the Center for Sustainable Agricultural Mechanization of UN ESCAP, based in Beijing in China. Next slide, please. So about burning of crop residue. Now, this is, as all of you would be aware, it's a serious concern in all across the Asia Pacific region and also in the ASEAN countries. At the level of soil health, burning of crop residue has negative impacts on soil nutrients, on soil pH, moisture, organic matter, and so on. Some farmers believe, burning releases nutrients, but, over the long term, there is certainly a decline in fertility through, the crop residue burning practices. At the level of the environment, burning of crop residue is a key source of air pollution. Haze knows no boundaries, so it also causes transboundary haze and consequent problems across borders, and then a key source of GHG emissions as well. At the level of public health, again, the release of particulate matter becomes a serious, environmental concern, a public health hazard, and in severe cases, even leading to disruption of transportation. I think needless to say, burning of crop residue, it's not well aligned with the principles of agroecology, of sustainable intensification, such as the recycling and building resilience of the farming community. Next slide, please. So this is a snapshot of the status of rice straw production in the ASEAN sub-region. In total, I think it's estimated that Southeast Asia generates as much as 210 metric tons of rice straw a year, and these figures are from some years ago. So the total now is likely to be significantly higher. Given that rice is a staple crop in the region, the generation of straw occurs in most countries. On the right, you would see a table where there is some specific areas within each countries that are important for rice production and consequently for generation of rice straw. Among the important large producers of rice straw are Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, and also Myanmar, with Indonesia contributing about 90 metric tons of rice straw a year. So there's need for approaches that span across countries and enable regional cooperation. Next slide, please. So if there is so much of rice straw being generated in the region, what are the alternatives to address this, and what are the sustainable uses of rice straw? Now, rice straw can be utilized as a fertilizer for enhancing the fertility of the soil and enhancing yields. It can be used as fodder for feeding cattle and livestock. The cow manure that's generated can be applied back to the soil as natural fertilizer. But rice straw can also use as a source of new energy, for example, for briquettes, for biogas production, for production of ethanol, which can supplement the use of fossil fuels. It can be used as base stock for mushroom growing and provide alternative income earning opportunities for farmers, and then also provide material for various industrial processes, for paper making, for building material, xylitol production, and so on. So there are a range of alternative uses for straw that can promote more sustainable straw management. Next slide, please. On the next slide, I would like to talk about an initiative of my center, the Center for Sustainable Agriculture Mechanization, on integrated management of straw residue for the Asia-Pacific region. In particular, in this initiative, we are promoting a circular model of straw utilization. When I say circular, what we mean is that the residue or the waste from one part of the process can feed as input into a subsequent process. So if you look at this graphic on the right, we have been promoting approaches for use of straw directly applied back to the soil as fertilizer, going back to the farmland directly, then being utilized as a fodder for cattle and livestock, and then the cow manure being fermented and fed back to the farmland to enhance fertility. At the same time, the straw and the cow manure can be fed into biogas digester for generating biogas and serve as a source of cooking fuel and lighting for the local communities. And then the residue or the slurry from the biogas digester can in turn go back to the field as fertilizer. And as I'd also mentioned in the previous slide, there is the approach of using the straw for substrate for growing mushrooms, and then the residue that's left after the mushroom growing process is again a good natural fertilizer and can be fed back into the soil. So this is how the circular approach is envisaged, and we're trying to. We've been implementing this in 2 pilot projects so far. One is in China and the other is in Vietnam. And for these pilot projects, the priority has really been to highlight the economic benefits of sustainable and integrated straws residue management to farmers, because we feel that's what is going to appeal most to the farming community and help in upscaling of the pilot technologies. In addition, the pilots are also trying to incentivize adoption and also local level adaptation of the technologies in order to match the local needs. Next slide, please. On next slide, we will see a snapshot of the pilot project in China. Now, this is on the wheat maize cropping system. But we believe that a number of the learnings and outcomes can be extended onto rice-based systems as well. So this pilot has been launched in July of 2019 and has been endeavoring to use rice straw residue as fertilizer, as fodder for biogas production. And mushroom growing. So from a 7-hectare pilot site, about 172 tons of wheat and maize straw per year have been sustainably utilized, amounting to an equivalent CO2 emission reduction of 221 tons per year. In addition, very interestingly, we found that the soil organic matter has gone up. From an initial value of 2.1%, it's gone up to 2.21% to up to 2.24%. So this is really evidence that the soil, the carbon content of the soil, the organic matter has been enhanced. From the perspective of farmers, the new formula for cattle fodder that we promoted through a ensilage process has helped in improving milk production. We've found that the production of milk per cow per day has gone up by a liter, and that's translated into economic benefits for the local farmers. And also by use of the straw as fertilizer, directly returning it to the field, and then use of the cow manure as fertilizer, the yields have gone up. And costs have come down, and this has increased the income of the local farmers by between $454 to $525 per hectare, depending on the type of use you're looking at. So I think this is just evidence of some very concrete benefits that have been accruing to the farming community from the pilot site. Next slide, please. On the next slide, there is a snapshot of the pilot that we have implemented in Vietnam. This was between 2018 to 2019. And as part of this pilot, we promoted the use of straw for indoor mushroom growing. And we demonstrated that this indoor mushroom growing technology was superior to the traditional or the outdoor growing method. And we found that the yield of mushroom increased. The rice straw using efficiency of approximately 26% was attained as compared to 13 to 15% in the traditional method. In addition, there was lower cost of production because the substrate after growing of the mushrooms could be applied back to the soil, and that resulted in reduced application of chemical fertilizers. And we also have found that it increased the porosity and fertility of the soil with positive impacts on the local environment. Next slide, please. So we're pleased to mention that based on the positive outcomes of these two pilots, we have secured additional donor funding to now expand to 3 new countries. We have an upcoming pilot project in Cambodia, which is under initiation in partnership with the Department of Agricultural Engineering of GDA of MAFF and also Swiss Contact. The target site is in Takeo province. So currently at the pilot site, rice is planted 2 or 3 times a year, and it's harvested using the combined harvester. The straw that has to be manually collected by hand if there is enough labor available. But as is so often the case, if the labor is too expensive or not available, the other option is to burn the straw. But through this pilot, we are going to implement a couple of different technical models. The first is the use of a baler, which is a machinery to compress the straw as bales, and then it can be transported to a different location for use as an alternative product. Secondly, we're also going to try out the use of machinery like a rotary tiller and a rice seed drill. So after rice is harvested, the straw would be plowed back into the soil, and then through decomposition it would serve as a fertilizer. And then for the next season, the planting would take place through use of the rice seed drill. This has the additional advantage that the use of the rice seed drill would enable survival of the seeds for a longer period of time, given the variation in the timing of rainfall. If the rainfall is delayed, the seeds can still survive for a longer time. And there's also better protection from birds and rodents. So this is an upcoming pilot in Cambodia. Next slide, please. Our other upcoming pilot is in Indonesia, in the Pati district in Central Java, in collaboration with the Indonesian Center for Agricultural Engineering Research and Development. So the current scenario is there's the rice, mung bean, or rice, soybean cropping cycle. So after use of a combined harvester for harvesting the rice, the leftover straw again has to be cut manually and spread manually in order to be used as mulch. But that's a very time and often an expensive process given the labor requirement, and so it's often dumped or burnt. So in the new technical mode that we will try, we will try to fit a straw cutter implement to a power tiller that you see in the picture on the lower half of the screen. And this can increase the efficiency of manual cutting of the straw, and this would be particularly suitable for small farmers. So this would hopefully enable increased alternative utilization of the straw as mulch. Next slide, please. Our next pilot, which is due to start, is in Nepal, in the Terai area. So this Terai area is the hub of cereal crop production, and there's a huge amount of straw that's generated, and it's often difficult to store the straw because of the bulk. So in our technical model, we are going to firstly promote the in-situ straw management through use of the happy seeder, which is a no-till planter and can enable use of straw as mulch. And then also for ex-situ straw management, where we will try to improve machinery for modified straw block making, and for compressing and enriching the nutrient content of the straw block so that it occupies less space and is more nutritious. So this is again the third pilot that is upcoming. Next slide, please. So what are the key takeaways from this regional initiative so far? So clearly, burning of straw residue, it's a shared concern, it's a transboundary concern and requiring urgent action. And this also poses a challenge to agroecology, to sustainable intensification, and to climate smart agriculture. So we do believe that agriculture mechanization offers alternative and very practical uses for enabling alternative uses of straw. And the idea is that in order to have successful solutions, we need context-specific alternatives suitable for the local agroecological conditions. We need active community engagement for local champions. For example, in China, we have a local cooperative that has a great standing in the community and has really helped to upscale the adoption. We also need local level adaptation. There's some machinery which may be too heavy for wet soils. So, we may need lighter machinery and for it to be modified to suit local conditions. We need training and capacity building, and in particular, approaches like demonstrations and pilots, which can really implement the seeing is believing aspect for the farming community. And then finally, we need a multi-stakeholder approach involving both government and non-government stakeholders, as well as regional and international cooperation and exchange to upscale good practices. So I'll stop here, and I look forward to listening to any questions, comments later on. Pascal, back to you.
Thank you, Anshuman, for this nice overview of what is happening right now for as alternative to rice straw boiling, and really looking forward to see what will be the upcoming pilot in the different countries you mentioned: Cambodia, Nepal, Indonesia. Thanks for all speakers for keeping the time. I think we are right in time. We still have a couple of minutes to pick up some questions. So I see that there is a question in the chat box. From Mario Evans. So maybe I can try to read it loud. I don't know for who it is, for which speaker it is specially raised. First question. So I think it's for you, Anshuman. Yeah, that's for the straw boiling. Thanks. So have you noticed rising issues in weeds, pest, disease? Is it often part of a rationale of such practice? How do you address it? So that's the first question. Maybe I can read them all. Yeah, maybe you can start with this one, and then we'll see if we can jump on the other one.
Yes, thank you for this question. So, at the moment, we have, implemented the, one pilot in China based on the, wheat maize cropping system. So, the overall cycle has really been to, implement the alternative uses of straw, going back as fertilizer or as cow manure, and then also using the straw as fodder for enhancing the value of milk production from the farming community. So this has been implemented as part of an overall approach for conservation agriculture in partnership with China Agricultural University. So, we have tried out, mechanical, solutions for addressing the issues of, weeds and so on. So it's the pilot is ongoing, but we have found that these issues for weeds and pests, they have been within the framework of an overall conservation agriculture approach. We've been able to minimize those issues and sort of maintain them at a controllable level. So that's the pilot is still ongoing. The data is still being generated, but I think just by using all the three principles for conservation agriculture directly and faithfully has helped us to keep these issues under check.
Thank you, and Anshuman, for your answer. And Mario is also asking a lot of questions related to crop livestock, equipment price, and return to investment, and and payment for environmental services. There's a long list of questions. What I propose, maybe Mario, is that you during the break, maybe Anshuman can try to answer part of it, or then you can try to also to be in contact each other to further discuss about these different points. I had a question also for from my side for Tatenda and Cornelia. I mean, you present a really interesting platform, so the VOCA platform, which is used to share knowledge and lessons learned among the different partners. I was wondering also how much this platform was used to monitor adoption of sustainable land management and impact from the adoption of this SLM.
Thanks a lot for this question. The monitoring part, the platform is so far still quite weak, as we as usually only have a one-time reporting of a technology in a specific place. So, but this is something we are currently discussing, and of course we would like to also increase to see how it is changing the method, the technology or the approach through over time, or by changing the local conditions. And so I think this is an important, very crucial point, which we cannot give you an answer right now. We do not have the monitoring, but we are working on that.
Thank you. I don't see any other question in the chat box, but I may have one for pitching for the first speaker. So you present a lot of partnership in Cambodia, so partnership with other institutions at the regional level, so the Global Soil Partnership, but also a partnership at national level with different ministries or different departments within the MARF, or even a local level with different institutions, trying to bring together farmers with service provider. I was wondering how much also this CA sustainable intensification process was linked also with climate smart initiative. I was thinking about the Cambodian Climate Change Alliance. So how much CA and SI are also linked with initiatives that are much more focusing on climate mitigation and adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pascal, for the question. We have conducted research for development for long time ago. As I mentioned, in 2004, we seen the significance for the CA's SIs is the excellent approach to capture the carbon from the atmosphere into the soil terrestrial system. And we now connected with the national or international networks, as you have mentioned, like CIRAS, like the Global Soil Partnership Platform. We try to encourage to adopt the CASI in terms of atmospheric carbon capturing into the carbon sequestration pattern into the soil. And now we are trying to connect with the Global Soil Partnership for establishing the national soil carbon sequestration that we can integrate with the global platform. So CASI is very important. If we can integrate it with this platform, and also we can extend for the carbon market budget as well. So I think it is very appreciated to link it in the CASIs in Cambodia to promote to be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Pichin, for this additional information. We are a little bit beyond schedule, so we're supposed to have a break at 2:15 for a 10-minute break. We have 5 minutes left. So what we propose is to make a short break, a shorter break than initially scheduled. So 5-minute break, and then to see you all back at 2:25. Thanks. See you in 5 minutes.
Okay, welcome back after this break, dear participants. We will now continue with the second part of our session 1A. And we have a series of very interesting speakers following up. Dr. Beria Lemona, Dr. Alain Carzenti, and Mr. Pierre-Antoine Vernet on our second part here. I would like to start with introducing Dr. Lemona as our first speaker. Dr. Lemona leads the cluster of activity entitled Global Learning Landscapes of the World Agroforestry Research Program on forest, trees and agroforestry. She also coordinates and leads research programs specializing in landscape governance and policy, innovative financing, community-based natural resource management, public-private partnerships, as well as sustainability standards and certification for agricultural commodities. Dr. Lemona, are you joining us live? I can see you. Yes, the line seems to be stable. That's great. So I give you the floor for your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cornelia. I assume that the team will turn on my movie on the presentation.
Okay, you will present by movie. Okay,
Yes.
Great. Super. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. I am Beria Limona from the World Agroforestry based in Indonesia. In the second presentations of the sessions, I'm highlighting the financing and investment aspects of the climate-smart agriculture. As we know, small-scale farmers in developing countries are disproportionately experiencing the effects of climate change. And they are at risk of external shocks, such as the current hits of COVID pandemic, for example. Small-scale agriculture actors also encounters a number of challenges in accessing the funds to tackle such shocks. This presentation is sharing some climate finance challenges for small-scale farmers, as it is subject to barriers that have traditionally affected agricultural finance in addition to barriers that are typical to climate finance. Giving you a bit empirical nuance, I'm also sharing a short case study from Indonesia on this topic. We understand that transforming the agriculture sector and building resilience will not be possible without significantly increasing the amount of capital available for climate-smart investments in agriculture. Access to finance has long been a challenge for agriculture. This is due to the perceptions that agriculture sectors are usually low profitability and have high risk. More than ever, robust financial investments are needed to support the global food system. Further, other key constraints in the agricultural finance are inadequate enabling environments, insufficient capacity to manage agricultural risk, and also high transaction costs. To address such constraints, the principle of integrated climate finance can be a catalyst to unlock additional sources of the public and private sector capitals, strengthening the links between the financial institutions, smallholders, and small micro enterprises, and also to build the capacity of both lenders and borrowers, targeting small-scale actors towards the sustainable production landscape. The Rojoso watershed is about 60 hectares, located in Pasuruan District, East Java Province, Indonesia. The watershed strategically functions as the source of water for domestic and industries. In this area also locates a strategic national water source project with the highest debit in Java Island. Farming of annual and perennial crops, including agroforestry, timber plantations, and livestock, is the dominant source of income for the small-scale smallholders in this area. The story of the Rojoso watershed in Indonesia shows how to increase the both resilience of smallholder and ecosystem service provisions by improving the capacity of production landscape to buffer the climate change. The Rojoso Kita project in Indonesia set up payment for ecosystem services in the upstream and midstream of the watershed and support the small-scale farmers to practice climate-smart agriculture, and facilitate the public-private people partnership. So together, all these stakeholders can find solutions to more effective watershed restorations, increased soil and water conservations, toward better quality and quantity of ecosystem services. Under this project, ECRAFT is partnering with Denon as the private sector operating in this area, District Watershed Multi-Stakeholder Forum, and Rabo Foundation as the impact investor. The second phase of the JOSO project is focusing on the paddy field landscape in the downstream clusters, where water efficiency use and also low emissions for paddy cultivations are become very important. In both phases, we ensure that every intervention, innovations at small scale level, and policy recommendations, especially for the local government, are based on scientific evidence and analysis. In this case, ecosystem services measurements such as level of water efficiency, erosions and infiltration rate, carbon stocks, greenhouse gas emissions are regularly monitored and measured. The impact measurement also includes the awareness and behavior change of the targeted farmers, including their income from good practice of climate-smart agriculture. This slide shows comprehensive views of my story on the Rejoso watershed. It starts from assessing the landscape to understand the ecosystem services and also socioeconomic characteristics of the farmers, strengthening the local institutions, from the farmer groups, cooperative, up to the multi-stakeholder forum, and also increasing the capacity of the local government to mainstream the innovations. When the institutional foundations is ready, the next step is to increase farmers' financial viability by connecting them with the financing institutions that may support them with access to finance, and also connections with the off-taker that buy premium commodities from the smallholders. Moreover, a partnership with private sectors that may provide them with incentives from the payment for ecosystem services is also nurtured. Impact investors that can support these smallholder to gain cash collateral so they can financing the business development through microfinancing schemes also can become a financial means so farmers can increase their income. And finally, they can cover their living expenses and for sure that to increase their livelihood resilience. In short, this may illustrate an example of an integrated landscape investment portfolio for financing small-scale farmers toward climate resilient livelihood and landscape. Successful landscape scale transformations toward climate resilience production landscape indeed requires what's so-called integrated landscape investment portfolio. It is a set of investment from a variety of sectors that taken as a whole contribute to multiple climate resilience objectives of livelihoods and landscape as mentioned previously. From the case study, we learn innovative ways to use climate finance to improve access and also reduce risk for smallholder farmers and farmer corporations in the agriculture sector. So it is possible to do this while delivering positive climate outcomes. Those are increased resilience and reduced greenhouse gas emissions. To reiterate, it starts from managing the landscape. As the implications, stakeholders must be better aligned and have integrated efforts to sustain and restore natural health and also ecosystem services. It is also very critical to improve human well-being and strengthens local economies at scale. To ensure that the landscape management and partnership endure, more comprehensive and coordinated landscape financing strategies are highly important. The integrated landscape finance is an innovation that aims encouraging synergies between investment to generate impact at scale, and for sure, support for multi-stakeholder dialogue and action platform, including the strategic planning, coordination, setting up new finance and policy mechanism, and not to forget the integrated landscape assessment and sustainability monitoring cannot be detached from the design and implementations of the integrated landscape finance. Some key takeaways. Firstly, to guarantee that climate finance happening, enabling environment for smallholders to access finance towards climate resilience needs to be set. From the research and design perspective, knowledge of socio-ecological system in the context of smallholders and production landscape are quite crucial. This knowledge includes, for example, existing local ecological knowledge, climate-related loss in food availability, characteristic and management practices of a diversified mixed crop or agroforestry, climate risk, and buffering capacity of the landscape. Further, a finance-enabling environment for agriculture needs to be created by support of better policy and regulations and willingness of government to financially and technically support the transitions toward climate-smart agriculture at scale. As we know that profitability for practicing business as usual, despite the short term, is higher compared to the climate-smart agriculture one. From the perspective of impact investors and financing institutions, transaction cost needs to be reduced. Support from their corporate social responsibility can be utilized, which can include, for example, branchless banking, mobile finance services, and financial literacy for the smallholders. And finally, integrated landscape finance needs to be addressed innovations on institutional and financial systems that can support the landscape investment at scale. And for sure, the policy actions to advance the diversified landscape investment portfolios. If you want to know more about our Rejoso Kita project, you can visit our Instagram and Facebook on Peduli Rejoso and also visit our website. Thank you and looking forward to hearing your inputs.
Thank you so much, Dr. Laimona, for this very interesting presentation. I would like to remind participants that you may ask questions directly also to the presenter by just either using the Q&A box or the chat function. So please don't hesitate if you have questions directly. We can also come back later. Any questions that you have, we can pick them up later again. So in order to do good timekeeping, I would suggest we proceed to the next presentation. I would like to warmly welcome Mr. Alain Carzenti. Alain Carzenti is an economist and researcher at CIRAD. He works on the analysis of public policies concerning forests, land, and the environment in developing countries. A lot of his activities are also in Central Africa. Mr. Carzenti's his main research topics are forestry taxation, concessions, and economic instruments that can be used to improve forest management and reduce deforestation. Excuse me. And he has a pronounced focus also on the REDD mechanisms. Mr. Carzenti has a lot of international recognition as researcher and expert and has mandates with the World Bank, the European Union, the ITTO, and other organizations. So please, Alain, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Cornelia. Should I? Okay, you are okay displaying my presentation. So it's about incentive-based instruments for agroecology transition, and also possible financing mechanisms, because some of the instruments have to be financed by some means and by someone. Next, please. So if we want to try to classify those instruments, we can first we have to remind or just to say that incentive-based instruments does not mean automatically market-based. For instance, for me, payment for environmental services are not market-based instruments, even if you have some carbon money on this, but it is something maybe we can discuss.
The purpose of this incentive instruments is a change of relative prices without exchange, for instance, not necessary exchange, to encourage stewardship for sustainable management, for forests, for agroecology. We can distinguish 4 categories. One are incentives based on market prices. Those are really market-based instruments. You have the certification and labels. You have also the incentive based on costs. Those are, it's about taxation. And you have also the incentive based on subsidies. Can be payment for PES or PES-like, because not all instruments are exactly designed as the ideal type of PES. And you have also incentive based on benefits from selling credits, can be carbon credits, but also you have new generation of credits that are water credits, biodiversity credits, etc. But probably I will focus only on carbon credits in that presentation. Some of these instruments, maybe the most promising ones, such as PES, maybe needs to be financed by someone. And it is a point I will raise in my presentation. Next, please. First, to focus on independent and third-party certification, you have some advantages, you have some drawbacks. Advantages are the fact that it's generally the kind of certification you can, most of general generalist certifications are holistic integrative approaches of the farm, including social dimensions, which is a point which is very important to notice. You have generally traceability systems that are also included into these certifications. And you, beyond single producers, what we know is certification for only one farm, one producer. There is a possibility to have group certification, and potentially it's not really developed now, but it is something that is emerging. Territorial jurisdictional certification also. You have also some drawbacks. The first one is the difficulties, the affordability for small-scale producers. It is costly. The audits are something that have a cost, which is sometimes difficult for small-scale producers. Also, what we can call the capture of auditors, the fact that very tough auditors will maybe lose clients, and on the other hand, complacent auditors, those who are flexible, would say, maybe will be selected, and you have this kind of adverse selection because the auditors are generally selected by the company or by the producer themselves. And the last drawback is the consumer willingness to pay. Consumers' willingness to pay, especially in developing countries. In fact, many products sometimes on some markets are sold without any price premium, and this is also the big difficulty if you don't have this kind of willingness to pay. And to compensate for insufficient price premium, public policies can provide some subsidies or can modulate taxes. For instance, what have been said that in organic grown rice in Cambodia do not enjoy some sufficient price premium at least, and maybe the alternative will be to have a public policies that cut costs to give a subsidy and to give an incentive. In forestry, for instance, private certification are more and more used in public policies. For instance, in Brazil and Peru, fiscal rebates for FSC certified timber are granted. In Gabon, you have now, it's very recent, 3 different area tax levels for FSC or PFC concessions, forest concessions. And also the last point, which is interesting from a perspective of also public policies, is that through accreditation, if a government decide to select some certifications because they consider that this kind of label provides some good some advantages, and through accreditations and fiscal advantages, rebates, for instance, governments can govern private certification, that they can contribute, they can push certification in the way they want to push to have a word to say on the evolution of certification. Next, please. One point I would like, which is something also emerging and which is extremely interesting for in terms of incentives, it's what we call the fee baits, for fees and rebates. In French or in other languages, it's bonus malus, also not well known with this term, on externalities, on negative externalities. Fee baits is an instrument of ecological taxation that combines an increase in taxes on unsustainably produced commodities with a decrease in taxes on products deemed sustainable. So the idea is that you have a budget neutrality, because the rebates are only possible if you have some malus, some more taxes derived from unsustainable commodities that are more taxed, and then you can subsidize the good guys, the produce which are sustainable. So it is something interesting because you have a budget neutrality, no fiscal losses, and because you are balancing on an annual basis tax increases and tax decreases. Fee baits should be associated to certifications, because I think it is the most simplest way to manage this kind of instruments, whether certifications are private or public. And traceability and adaptation to context are the two assets that are probably are advantages are for of certifications over other probably means. You have I think this is a job of certification to really to design some traceability system and to adapt to context. Fee baits can be also designed for apply for organic production, zero pesticides, agroforestry, as also zero deforestation productions for many commodities, for oil palm, etc. Export taxes, when you have export taxes, are generally a good lever, a good point for implementing fee baits. But not all products are concerned. You have some products which are not exported, so no export taxes, but you have generally other taxes. However, the drawback with that fee baits mechanism is that it needs dynamic adaptation of tax rates over time, bonus rates over time. Why? Next, please. Because the idea, can you also click to have the idea is that this is an example, for instance, in an African country about cocoa export, and in that simulation we have done that with the World Bank. We have proposed to implement a fee bet for certified cocoa, for instance, and the idea is that now you don't have any we assume that you don't have at the beginning of you don't have any cocoa beans certified, and we want to have all certified after 6 years. So the idea is to start. You have an export tax which is 14.6%, and the idea is that we are going to increase by 1% per year the malus, which is the tax on non-certified cocoa beans. This will allow to decrease, and this is a graph that you have on the right, upper right. To increase is the blue line. You increase the rate tax for uncertified products, allowing you to decrease the tax rate for certified products. But the fact is that if you really succeed, that people change their mind, change their behavior, go for certification, you will have less taxes because you have less malus. And then at the end, you start with 3%. You start with 14.6%, and you come back to 14.6%. But if you have uncertified products, you have a difference of 6 points, 6% between certified and uncertified. You have, you see on the other graph on the bottom of the bottom right, you see the line, the straight line, which is exactly the same amount of taxes for this state, but the origin of the receipts just shift from uncertified to certified, and so you have a kind of good incentives. In that case, you may have a potential role for donors to guarantee the state that they will not lose, to guarantee a zero revenue loss, because one thing that can happen is that you can have 1 year more people than expected that go to certification. In that situation, you will have less taxes, and so you may have a budget imbalance, budget losses, and so it could be compensated. Next, please. Second instrument are PES. For me, I make a distinction, conceptual distinction between ecosystem services, which are ecosystem services that people obtain from ecosystem, and environmental services. Environmental services are action or management method of an actor, let's say a farmer, that improves the state of the environment by enabling an ecosystem services to be increased. And so it is why personally I speak of payment for environmental services, which is about practices, about paying for practices farmers are going to implement on the field. Those are contracts and related to land use practices or zoning assumed to be favorable to ecosystem services. For instance, forest maintenance, water quality. Even if the service is poorly defined, generally it's you have a bundle of services, not only one carbon services, but many services, and it probably it's better to do this. Okay, I have to go faster. Please, can
Yes,
you?
sorry, Alan.
No, you're
put
okay.
a bit
You're
of
welcome.
pressure on you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's go for the next one, please. It's important, just the title, to have PES with a systemic approach. Not PES only for carbon, not PES only for biodiversity, but for a bundle of services. And it is something I have not time to discuss, but it's good to have a kind of scoring system with PES rather than other system. Next, please. Big issue is to finance PES. Most of the time, succeeding PES programs, like in Costa Rica or Mexico, is based on taxation, is based on levies on fuel in Costa Rica and water also, which are earmarked for PES. It's a way to have a sustainable funding and a long-term funding, because people are going to, you are not dependent of, for instance, the carbon markets that can vary, or the budget that can be submitted to some new priorities. Next, please. Carbon credits, please. Next, because I think I'm out of time. We can skip this one. There is a new trend about for soil carbon farming for carbon credits. There is a number of private certification standards that might seem attractive for farmers. A recent study we have done with Julien de Menoir, one of our colleagues, we have found that it's going, transaction costs will be very high. And so we are questioning the fact that this kind of approach will be adapted for small scale farmers. We are skeptical about this because the experience in forestry have showed that you need to have some large farms or large plantations to just to afford for the transaction cost for the audit, because it's quite costly. And we really push for soil carbon. We think that it's better to have holistic third-party certifications like Rainforest Alliance, for instance, of some generalist certification, rather than specific Vera VCS, for instance, certification for carbon credits, because for many reasons, because you have many services that are taken into account, including the social dimension, which is absolutely key. Last one, please.
Alan,
And
I would
Kay, take
really
away.
love to. Okay, good. Very good.
It is the last one.
Thank you.
So the idea is just to combine the instruments, not having one instrument cannot be a silver bullet. You maybe linking fee bets with certification can result into a combination of price premium and cost reduction. Could be a good tandem. Well-designed PES program can lead to systemic change to agroecology, and you can combine certification, PES, and fiscal incentive. And at the end, carbon credit selling can run PS projects or programs, but you be aware that you have high transaction costs, risk of trade-off between services, and question of environmental integrity, because there is the issue of additionality and non-permanence, which is associated with carbon credits. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Alain. Thank you so much. I'm sorry to rush you through this very interesting presentation, but to keep being in the time that we are supposed to have for this session, I have to continue, and I would like to introduce Mr. Pierre-Antoine Vernet as our next speaker. Pierre is a French international volunteer working with CIRAD on scaling up agroecology and climate change mitigation practices in Cambodia. And currently, Mr. Vernet is involved in the ASEAN project, working on rewarding system to incentivize farmers for carbon sequestration and ecosystem service production through the carbon market. So this links very nicely to what was just presented by Alain. Please, Pierre-Antoine, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to everyone. So my name is Pierre Vernet. I will be the speaker today. I will be presenting DAMIAS, which is an initiative. Damian means golden soil in Khmer language. And the whole topic is about introducing farmers to carbon market. It's a project that actually have been created by a consortium or a group of different institutions. So first CIRAD, by also Marc Eberle, that is representing Smart Agro, by Rajiv Pradham, representing Swiss Contact, and by Florent Yvet, also from CIRAD. Next slide, please. So the objectives of the presentation will be to present the first pilot in Cambodia to reward farmers for soil carbon sequestration and ecosystem services production. So exactly, it actually really bounce back with what Dr. Kassanti was talking just before. And we have absolutely the same kind of point of trade-off and thoughts that he has. I will come back to them later on. And we will detail the pilot structure and the expected outcome of the DAMIAS initiative. Next, please. Okay, briefly, I will go through the global challenge and opportunity, go a bit deeper inside of the Cambodian context, and detail more about conservation agriculture. However, all these 3 points have been talked broadly, I think, during the previous presentation, so I will speak about them a bit fast. Then I will present the DAMIAS Golden Soil Pilot and speak a bit more about the voluntary carbon market, why we want to actually go through it, and how we want to interact with the different trade-offs that have been presented just before. And then explain a bit more detailed in my timeline, obviously, the structure of the pilot and its location and the different partners that we want to involve in it. Next, please. The global challenges are obviously there's food security, ecosystem services, and climate change. And I don't think I need to actually go deeper into this information, but this is definitely the main challenges that we want to work on. Next, please. And this initiative is linked to the 4.1 initiative that has been also presented slightly before, which meant which aimed to increase the soil carbon storage of the world's soil by 4 per 1,000, as the name says. And according to the UN IPCC, nearly 20% of all the humanitarian annual carbon footprint can be sequestered by farmers and ranchers worldwide and at lower cost. And this is why what we want actually to try in this pilot is like to focus on actually how can we implement that with farmers in Cambodia at lower cost. Next, please. So we already seen a slide quite similar from different speaker before, but just a reminder, land degradation status in Cambodia is quite high, saying that in Cambodia, 79% of the Cambodian population live in the rural area, and 42% of the whole agricultural land is medium to severely degraded, which actually costs a lot to the country, which is estimated to $677 million US. And all of this land degradation also have a huge impact on our three challenges, which are climate change, ecosystem services, and food security. Next slide, please. Okay, so exactly. So we have the three pillars of the conservation agriculture, and minimum or no tillage, permanent soil cover, and spatial diversity, and rotational activities and practices. Each of these activities have very positive impact and co-benefits directly on the environment, biodiversity, and on the carbon or greenhouse gas emissions, saying that it will lower the greenhouse gas emission by certain practices. It will increase the soil organic carbon in the soil by increasing the biomass that is on the soil, and it will enhance biodiversity by just doing intercropping and inducing new species into the agricultural system in Cambodia. All the co-benefits are well known also: soil improvement, reduce erosion, increasing fertility, etc., etc. Please, next slide. So if conservation agriculture can improve soil health and livelihood, then why aren't farmers doing it in Cambodia, or why the scaling up is taking more time? Because it takes time in investment, actually. So how can we incentivize these farmers' transition towards sustainable and regenerative practices and reward them for carbon and ecosystem services? How can we use a tool to promote and to fast forward this transition? Next slide, please. This is where we actually get into DAMIA's pilot, which is an initiative to for transitioning system for carbon farmers, which have two main objectives, which is one, incentivizing smallholders to adopt sustainable practices with a transparent reward system. And second is quantifying carbon sequestration and emission reduction with an effective and inexpensive MRV system. This is what we aim for during our pilot. Next slide, please. So this carbon that have been sequestrated, we want to create carbon credit out of it, and so it will potentially actually reward the farmer, but not exactly as, I will detail this part later, but one carbon credit is equal to 1 ton of CO2 equivalent. One CO2 equivalent reduced is meant 1 ton of CO2 offset, which can be 1 ton sequestrated or 1 ton of CO2 equivalent that is not emitted in the atmosphere. These credits are then put it on the carbon market, which is a trading scheme for these carbon credits. And we want to go for the carbon market as a tool to incentivize these farmers to adopt, in order for them to adopt more easily sustainable and regenerative practices. Next, please. So here is a detail of a timeline for the carbon market, the voluntary carbon market project, saying that it will take at least a 10 years involvement period for one project, starting with the contract and then the adoption. For example, here we took 2022. The adoption would be in 2022, but the first issued carbon credits would take between 3 to 5 years, meaning that the first issued credit would arrive something around 2025, depending on a certain amount of different assets, such as the methodology, the credit class. I will go slightly deeper in detail after that. But this is a whole carbon certification process that takes time. So farmers are not mainly willing to be waiting this time to risk a transition to new practice without incentive. So what we want to do through DAMIAS is to enter carbon market and aim to pay the farmers straight from the first year of transition. Next, please. So the number will have to be changed, but basically the DAMIAS pilot at a glance, we want to target a large amount of hectare of regenerated land with a different set of practices, how we said before, the cover cropping, no-tillage, diversify rotation, but actually we are now going a bit more broad with the sustainable land management practices. I will maybe, if I have a bit of time, I will detail them later. And we will aim to reward them during this pilot of 3 years for now. Please, next slide. Okay, this is this slide. I want to go a bit more detail in the whole model. Oh, okay, the animation are going. And so the project developer and aggregator will be held by Smart Agro, Swiss Contact, and CIRAD, as well as the GDA, General Department of Agriculture, which will support the transition with the farmer. The farmer will be sequestrating the carbon through the sustainable practices. We will incentivize, we will help with technical assistance and link to the private market for the different conservation agriculture assets. Then there will be a whole credit component, which is here in blue, where all the data from the field, as well as some part of the modeling, will be taken in an MRV system, measuring or monitoring, reporting, and verification system, and which will be verified afterward by a third-party verification, where afterward the proof of impact or the proof of carbon sequestration will be afterward be given to a certifier, which is the one giving the methodology, which will allow the issuance of the carbon market. Next slide, please. Just to go a bit more detail in the MRV system, what we want to do is to combine national, regional, and on-plot data in order to have an effective but also cost-efficient measuring process and system during the whole process of the pilot. So we can quantify effectively the carbon that is being sequestrated or the emissions, greenhouse gas emissions that have been reduced. So to do that, we will use the data collection platform, satellite remote sensing imagery and modeling, platform tools such as the CBP that people from OCAT have been talking about, as well as we will compare several ones such as Exact, CBP, ROTC, and others. We'll do obviously some soil tests for the baseline and using also spectroscopy measurement systems. And we will basically try to find out how we can effectively and cost effectively use this MRV system. What are the trade-offs between precision and cost? Next slide, please. The credit class and the reward system will be based on the practices that have been implemented by the farmers. We want to reward them depending on what they have been doing and not on the carbon, precisely on the carbon that have been sequestrated, because otherwise they would have to wait, as we said before, 3 to 5 years if they want to be rewarded directly through the form of carbon credits. So what we want to do is link the scientific background and the literature and from our experience on the ground between one practice and the carbon sequestration and emission reduction, as well as all the ecosystem linked to these practices. And each one of these practices will be linked to one reward, we will say. And they will depend on how effectively and successfully this practice will have been put in place on the ground. But this is still a work in progress. Next slide, please. The different outcomes from the EMEAs are increasing farmers' livelihood and quality of food product. Will obviously during the whole project, there will be a large amount of carbon sequestrated as well as a large amount of greenhouse gas emission reduction. This whole process will be driven by farmer-centered research driven by PhD studies. We want to build the first, as we said, first market linked to smallholder farmer on cropland and getting to scale linking farmers to new ecosystems payment schemes. Next, please. Okay, for the pilot location, this one is not really precise. This maps actually shows the whole farmers network we are working currently on the field with in Battambang province in Cambodia. But where we will be working mainly will be in lowland and upland to have a diversified credit class and innovative practices to work with. So one will be located in Kong Hot irrigation scheme in the lowland, and the second one will be located with 2 villages in the north of Ratanak Mondul districts. Next, please, and we will probably be the last, actually. Oh no, the project, okay, sorry, I will go fast. This is my last slides. The project developer of these pilots will be the CIRAD and the GDA as the national research centers. Swiss Contact as an international NGO working on the business model and supporting system, as well as the project management. And also with Smart Agro, which is a private company promoting the cover crops and technical advisory and assistance on the ground. Next. Okay, in this slide also there have been so few changes, but the main registry on which we will be working will be Region Network, and something that do not appear in our slide, but mainly we want to work with also cooperatives and other program already on the ground, working already with farmers in order to have a common pool of farmers who are already also sensitized on our practices. Next one and last, I think this one. Yes, the key takeaway will be the land degradation and poor soil management have direct consequences on food security, climate change, and livelihood. Redesigning agriculture can be a solution through transitioning to sustainable soil management, increasing profit, enhancing resilience, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The farmers benefit additional revenue stream. The farmer will get an additional revenue stream through carbon sequestration and ecosystem services production. And what they aim to do is to bridge the financing gap and to pay farmers already in the first years of this transition in order to incentivize the adoption of these practices. Next slide. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Pierre. And just a quick question of understanding: how many farmers are you working with currently in your pilots?
In the pilot, this is also something that we need to figure out. So far, we have been working on the project area in order to be able to stratify the land, because depending on climate, topography, cropping system, there is different methodology that we can include or not. So for now, we don't have a precise number of farmers that we want to involve, but it will be probably around, for now, for the first year only, it will be probably around 100 farmers in each, 100 households in each of upland and lowland locations. So we can have a broader idea of the practices we can implement and on which they can be rewarded. It's also for the monitoring feasibility and etc.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any questions on the chat. However, there has been a sort of parallel question and answer session going on. Marie-Aude Even has asked questions directly to Alain Carcenti, which he has also answered. Please consult the questions, the Q&A tab also to follow up on these questions. I can take up maybe the last one that was asked by Marie-Aude Even to Alain, but maybe also others. The question is there any promising advances on digital GIS tools to cut some of the transaction costs? Alain, would you be, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just seeing that you have already answered this. Okay, then I suggest that we stick to the program and go to our next point in the program, namely the panel discussion that we have planned. So I have asked these four experts here, Dr. Beria Lemona, Ms. Aneta Nikolova, Dr. Tatenda Lehmann, who all of the three you have already heard through presentations, but then also Ms. Imelda Bakudo, to act as panelists, to have a joint discussion. First, to hear their views on three questions that I asked them in the run-up to this session. I will post them right away. And then afterwards, I would really like to open up the discussion for all panelists, but also for participants to reflect more on the different presentations that you have now heard, and where could there be synergies, what are challenges, etc., and just to get also your inputs from the audience that is here with us today. But before I do so, please let me briefly introduce also Ms. Imelda Bakuda, whom we have not heard so far. She's an expert on climate policy and finance, land use and climate smart agriculture. Imelda Bakuda is an independent consultant that provides technical advice to ASEAN and its member states for strengthened regional and international policies for climate financing. She has over 20 years of experience in the area of biodiversity conservation, sustainable development, and also conservation finance, and works with a lot of different NGOs, but also national governments and international bodies. So welcome, Imelda, to this panel. Could we please skip to the next slide? Next slide, Alex. Yeah, and you can skip ahead for that one, please. Thank you. Yes, so I come to the questions that I asked the panelists beforehand. So I asked them to please reflect on what are the most important challenges for monitoring and for financing of climate actions, in particularly in the Mekong area, but also in a wider area if you prefer to refer to that. And where do you see opportunities and synergies for scaling up monitoring and financing of climate actions? So we have seen a lot of interesting case studies, smaller or bigger ones, and I'd be really interested to hear from you what are opportunities to really scale this up, but also where are maybe obstacles. And finally, since the COP26 is happening at this moment also, we'd be really interested to hear from you what you would like to take to the COP26 as messages to world leaders for how to really make this agroecological transition possible. And I would like to, so every panelist was given a maximum of 4 minutes to reflect on these 3 questions. And I would just like to go through one after the other and give you the opportunity to give your inputs, and afterwards to open the floor to the participants also. So may I start with Aneta Nikolova to give her views on these 3 questions. We cannot hear.
Sorry, yes, I'm muted. There is a t-shirt at the COP on I'm muted. So it must be a common worldwide virtual meetings problem. I apologize for any noise you could hear from the surroundings. I have no control of that. I'm sorry. Now, okay, not to eat my 4 minutes further. Important challenges in monitoring and financing. As I mentioned in my presentation, monitoring, verification, reporting and verification systems, which are the basis for the enhanced transparency framework of the Paris Agreement, are super important. And ASEAN is a bit not developed well in that area. That includes all the countries in the Mekong region, but as the whole ASEAN as well. So it will help the countries to build trust of financial institutions, that it is well known what certain investment projects will be having as an impact of reduction of the emissions. And it will be clear picture, right? There is scenarios developed, etc. So it's very important to develop that. What are the opportunities for synergies and scaling up that in the region? Or I would speak about the ASEAN, because the ASEAN has this opportunity as a region with a very strong collaboration mechanism there to first harmonize the way they develop their NDC commitments. I don't know if you're aware, but the NDC commitments are very different. Some do intensity targets, others do direct reductions, straightforward. Others do BAU reductions. It is very complex, and it makes the transparency very difficult, because when you compare the countries, it's not possible, and there's a lot of room for errata also, which is not good for the countries, right? That they are qualified as less achievers or not sufficient achievers if they actually are. And so this is for the researchers and for us like researchers, this has been one of the biggest challenges. So harmonizing is very important. Using the mechanism of the ASEAN, please do that, work together, and establishing common tools for investment, payment for environment services is transboundary mechanism as well. It can be used as a transboundary mechanism. I like previous presenter very much, and it should be tested in ASEAN as well. Also, investment in nature-based solutions, which we have transboundary areas as well, is very important. The Mekong River, for me, requires that attitude, that attention as a transboundary nature body. And message to the COP, yes, we need more attention in our region. I know we need a lot of attention also in Africa, and actually, to be honest, African countries are a little bit more advancing than us. They're thinking of this investment in nature-based solutions to do it as a group, as countries, and to bargain against that for swaps of debts, debt swaps, and for investments. So we need to do the same here. Instead of competing between each other, we need to do that as well. So messages towards COP, but also the countries that are attending in COP from our from the ASEAN region, unite together, think and get the opportunities together as a team. It's very important. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annette, for this input, for these very important points that you mentioned. Before we continue, I'm still trying to see if Ms. Imelda Pakuda, if we could see you. I cannot see you currently. Can you maybe switch on also your camera? Is that possible? Then we have you next to the others on the panel.
Hello, this is Imelda Bakudo. I believe I am not speaking today, but my colleague, Dr. Margaret Yuvotana, will be speaking.
Okay, sorry, I think we have a misunderstanding here. We are here in the session 2A with the panel discussion. I will get you on the chat, and we will just continue now with the other panelists to continue the discussion. May I hand over the word to Dr. Beria Leimona for her inputs regarding the 3 questions.
Yes, thank you, Cornelia. It also has mentioned in my presentations that the amount of financing or capital that available for these climate smart investment, particularly in the agriculture sector, is very limited, as this has to also to cover the transitions of smallholders coming from the business as usual practice into the more environmental friendly climate smart agricultural practices. So if you know, like for example, if they somehow change their practices, there will be lower productivity for sometimes, right? Because like for example, if they only use organic chemical inputs, then it changes to an organic one, for sure that there will be a lower productivity in the transition, right? At least the short term. So sometimes in many cases that the financing the agriculture transitions to the more sustainable practices is still lacking attentions on this matter. And then the second one, I would like to say that this is also connecting what I have mentioned just now. It's about that how the smallholders, especially, and also the micro, small, medium-sized enterprises, they have a limited institutional mechanism to assess these large pools of funds for them to enable having like a more stable and also a more profitable business model. Especially, well, in the conventional way, they are still very limited. And then connecting to my first point, even more for the green businesses at scale. And for the potential, I can see that from the previous presentations, there are some initiatives that trying to link on the landscape management with institutions and with the practices that provide example on good climate smart agriculture. However, again, that combining all of these together as the basis for integrated landscape finance is still very limited. And we also know that there are lots of financial innovations all over the world. There are like a fund, they are funding green businesses, enterprises project, nature-based agriculture financing, etc., etc. However, seeing that all interlink and work together in a landscape is still also a very limited case. And for sure that connecting to my points on the challenge and potential, some of the messages I would like to deliver, especially for this COP, as you mentioned. Yeah, it's about the integrated landscape assessment and sustainability monitoring, as mentioned by Dr. Aneta in her statement. So this type of assessment and monitoring cannot be detached from the designs and also the implementations of integrated landscape finance. And for sure that for the global decision maker to facilitate this concept of integrated landscape finance, advance the diversified of investment portfolios working together in a landscape, and also working on the synergies between different investment, it will be make like a more enabling conditions in generating impacts at scale. So that would be my points, Cornelia. Thank you.
Very interesting, the bringing in the landscape level to this discussion, to bridge between local level actions and also the global debates. Thank you very much, Dr. Lemona. I would like to hand over the word to my colleague Tatenda Lehmann to give some viewpoints from his perspective, so the WCAT lens on these questions. Please, Tatenda.
Thank you very much, Cornelia. And unfortunately, I am actually not the expert in this region, or honestly speaking, I was so far, unfortunately, never in the Mekong Basin. And therefore, I would rather like to focus on the third question. So the question about the linkage of land use, land management, and the UNFCCC COP that is happening at this moment. But for that, I would like to start with a statement from the other Rio Convention, so from the UNCCD, because they're in response to the IPCC special report on climate change and land. I think it was in 2019. The UNCCD Executive Secretary, Ibrahim Tiaf, said, "We must harness the enormous positive potential of our lands and make them part of our climate solutions." And indeed, as we have learned today, land management is in a special situation to have the possibility to be part of the problem with its emissions of carbon dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, or methane, and so on. But at the same time, a sustainable land management can also be the solution by increasing the uptake of and storage of CO2, and of course, by reducing all kinds of greenhouse gas emissions. So, but often these solutions are very specific actions in very specific locations that we have to bring up to a global scale. As an example, to the national reporting for all Rio conventions. But of course, also the other way around. So the promises and ideas of the countries have to find its way down to the ground. And here in our global debate, we have to take care that we are not only promising to plant billions of trees, we have to consider that very specific locations and the ecosystems require very specific actions. And also here, as we have heard today in several discussions, it is not all about carbon only. All dimensions of sustainability on all services have to be considered to have a sustainable impact. So we have the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration now, and all of these 8 defined ecosystems have its value and have to be restored with a big diversity of measures, always depending on the local context. And we have to stop thinking in silos, get stuck on levels, or get lost in terminologies, because finally land users, or also donors, by the way, they often don't care if a measure is an EPA, a CSA, or SLM, because they just want to do the best with and for their land. So as we want to do it with our projects. And I think an interesting meeting point, therefore, is the Rio Convention Pavilion at the COP26, where they actually collectively aim to highlight opportunities for coordinated action towards land degradation neutrality, towards carbon neutrality, but also halting loss of biodiversity, and to achieve all the sustainable development goals by 2030. As it was mentioned by Anita Nikolova in the opening remarks, it is important to commit what is already there. And we have to harmonize our interests and actions actually across the levels or conventions, because then finally, then in the reportings and so on, if we can combine this, then 1 + 1 finally will be more than only 2.
Thank you very much, Tatenda, for these thoughts. I would like to invite still Ms. Imelda Pakuda to give some thoughts from her point of view to this panel. Imelda, are you here?
I'm here.
Sorry for the confusion.
Okay. Okay. So I would like to answer 2 of the 3 questions and give some, share some information relevant to the second and third question, which is on financing, and another one on COP26. Yesterday, I spoke about the ASEAN Climate Resilience Network, which has been supporting the agriculture sector or agriculture work groups of ASEAN in relation to climate change and agriculture. And so in relation to that, there has been several outputs in the last 7 years that we have been working that actually highlighted the priorities and needs of the region. As well, the ASEAN Climate Resilience Network gave birth to the ASEAN Negotiating Group for Agriculture, which recently went to COP26 to shape the Coronivia joint work on agriculture. So the outputs and formed the basis, the outputs of the ASEAN Climate Resilience Network formed the basis for, I would like to share this information, a multi-country proposal to the GCF of 6 countries of Southeast Asia. That's Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, which are, I know, related to the Mekong region, together with Philippines, Malaysia. So these 6 countries are hoping to access a readiness fund, and we hope that collaboration would happen later on, in which alignments with climate change national frameworks will be done, and preparation of agriculture investments to access larger, wider climate finance, as well as private sector financing. So it's in the last stage, we have submitted already, and we hope that this will be, the GCF express support and acceptance of this proposal. And we really hope to work with a lot of you that has been sharing your organizations and your initiatives. Really hope for ASEAN CRN in the last 7 years has really worked on the principle of collaboration and not inventing the wheel. So we hope you guys will be in touch with us, or we will be in touch with you as we proceed to make these agriculture investment plans, especially in alignment with climate change frameworks. The second one is on key messages to COP26. I would like to draw your attention to the ASEAN Negotiating Group for Agriculture please feel free to reach out to us. This has been one of the systemic changes that we have endeavored in the last 5 years with the support of ASEAN negotiating focal points from the Ministries of Agriculture. As you know, most of the negotiators at the UNFCCC are mostly coming from the Ministries of Environment, with the exception of some of the countries' agriculture and food security issues have not been the focal points of climate change discussions in the past, with it being maybe REDD+ and energy taking center stage. So with the landmark decision of UNFCCC giving focus on agriculture and food security, called the Coronivia Joint Work for Agriculture, we have formed this group with the endorsements of the 10 ministries of agriculture, and we have endeavored to include agriculture as part of every national UNFCCC negotiating team. It was a very long and very challenging process. We have tried to build capacities as well of the agriculture sector itself to be able for agriculture sector to be able to speak for itself and negotiate at this multilateral environment agreement level. So we're still new, we're called new kids at the block, but there's so much energy behind it. And I would like to, for example, invite Dr. Aneta, please get in touch with this group so that we do a lot of commonality exercises. The Coronivia Joint Work for Agriculture has called for 7 topics, and New Zealand, for example, has also supported an extra workshop on the topic of water management and several other key topics. The decision, there was not much concrete decision that came out of COP26 for agriculture, and it is hopefully going to be continued with Egypt's presidency next year. But meanwhile, what ASEAN is united on is that at COP26, despite very long negotiations, discussions on comma, on paragraphs, on nitty-gritty word discussions, ASEAN was united in asking for implementation and action. Since Coronivia in the last 2 years have already asked for views from parties, there are very concrete and determined needs of the region. It's already there. What we were pressing for is action, mandating subsidiary bodies, mandating constituted bodies to give priorities to agriculture and the transformation for a resilient and low emissions food system. So this is some of the information sharing. Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Imelda, for these inputs. And again, sorry for the confusion before. I am checking the chat to see, yes, if there are questions. So I have a question from Mark Eberle to Imelda. What mechanism would help to separate voluntary carbon market projects from NDCs?
Whoa, this is a very specialized topic. What? Separate voluntary carbon market projects from NDC. I think this is within the Kyoto Protocol, and we are really working on the Coronivia Joint Work on Agriculture. ASEAN is negotiating under the G77 and China group, and this group has been advocating for non-imposition of mitigation measures, mandating mitigation measures on agriculture. So I think this is, I could not answer this question, but so far for G77 in China, mitigation is often mentioned as an adaptation co-benefit rather than mandating low emissions.
Is this a question somebody else from the panel could maybe give more insights? Aneta, would you be able to give more insights on this question, or?
Actually, voluntary carbon markets, when they are initiated by a country, they are included in the NDCs because this is part of it to show which kind of instruments I use, carbon pricing, ETS, emission trading schemes. When we talk about, so they need to be connected with the NDCs. I think everything needs to be connected with the NDCs to enhance the achievement of commitments. Otherwise, it becomes two different processes and it's very difficult to follow it up, to have a full picture. We're talking about carbon dioxide, right? Reductions, or other even more important like methane, etc. We need to have a full picture what is going on. So everything which is not coordinated is not very good. That is what I can say. So they should not be separated. They need to be connected and they need to show how they're enhancing NDC implementation and even going beyond that.
Thank you very much, Aneta, for these additions. While listening to all of you, it became very strong from the different panelists, basically, that there is a huge need of collaboration between different agencies and a need for multi-stakeholder approaches. And we had a very interesting presentation from our colleague Alain, who was really the first time giving also a bit of insights into financial mechanisms, but also the role of the financial sector. I was wondering if you had any opinions or more points to say on what is the role of the financial sector to really help to scale up these climate actions or also climate smart agriculture farming, and what are maybe also the stumbling stones that are still out there. So yeah, I'm just throwing it out there for you panelists, but also for participants to this, yeah, for those who participate, please give your answers also through the Q&A, and I could read them.
Dr. Cornelia, can I just going back to this other question? Is it possible to ask Mark? Is he referring to the double selling of carbon? So there is a need to separate what is being sold at the voluntary carbon market from the NDC. Is that more? Okay, he said yes. So I suppose a jurisdictional approach, which looks at a unified registry, is being explored to do this so that there's no double selling and double counting of the contribution. And I think Article 6 of the Paris Agreement is really moving towards this. And I work on one project looking at Kalimantan and Palawan in the Philippines that's trying to see and solve this double counting and double selling, and looking at the possibility of each countries having their unified registries. And one of the mechanism being supported or being explored could be a jurisdictional sustainability approach with unified registry for it. But this is a very technical for forestry people. Yes, but that's so far what I know.
Thank you very much. May I pass the word to Pascal Lienard for asking a follow-up question or putting discussion into the room?
Thank you, Cornelia. I had a question related to the last exchange we had that happened at the COP26. I mean, we have been focusing mainly so far on carbon sequestration for climate priority intervention, and in this Glasgow COP26 meeting, a greater attention has been given to methane. And we know that in the region, lowland rice production as well as livestock are a key source of methane emissions. So I was wondering how far or how much also it's It has to be taken into account in the guideline and in the priority climate actions for the region. Thank you.
So the question of methane, but also other greenhouse gases. Would any of the panelists like to share their thoughts on this, or we continue with some other thoughts?
Maybe less related to the region, but more in general, that it's important to not only focus on CO2 as an example, but really to focus on all the greenhouse gases. And here, as an example, with the carbon benefit project tool, it is possible if you have a land use change where you have from one land use to the other more livestock, as an example, that you are taking those things into account as well, so that you really have a holistic calculation then of the greenhouse gases and not only focusing on one. And therefore, I think it makes sense to now also focus on the methane. And I think that's very welcome as well.
Mm-hmm. And going back to this, in my mind, I still have a little bit this landscape level approaches that are needed, or just the focus on the landscape level. So we have a global debate at a very high level, then we have a lot of local actions. And I would just be interested also to hear more from you, Dr. Leymona, but also from Pierre, who has been speaking before. What do you think is needed to really scale up these initiatives that look really promising, are tested in very as a particular contextual settings? So what can we do to really ramp these initiatives up and make them go to scale?
May I, Cornelia?
Yes, please.
Yes, very interesting questions because it's also being raised when we are piloting something on the ground, right? And then what it takes to scale up. And from my experience, the most important thing is that to design the project or the initiative from the beginning, having different sectors contributing from the initial initiative. Because the problem is now is that sometimes certain stakeholders are being brought in the later stage of the project, when we are thinking that, oh, it's timely for private sector, just bringing them at the middle, like for example. However, the overall structure of the project from the beginning usually cannot match into their interest, or maybe also cannot match into their institutional expectation. So we are now testing these together, even if you started from the beginning designing as a multi-stakeholder project, it still has some challenges, right, to be raised. However, I think we should keep this working, and connecting into the monitoring sections that Dr. Aneta Nikolova also mentions. It's also taking seriously about the measurement of ecosystem services and also the impact for the smallholders, because we are now talking about the impact investor who are really willing to fund or finance such initiative, new interventions. The next question will be, what will be beneficial for them, right? If we are still talking about a lacking of method, lacking of knowledge, lacking of biophysical instruments to measure such beneficial additionality of the project, then the circle will never stop, right? So I think, and I also seeing from the questions and answer, it's like how to, like for example, investing in these satellite images, for example, and those things to make the monitoring and also the measurement of the impact of ecosystem services are become more lower in cost, but it's also more simpler and also provide like a tangible outputs. That may be from me for now. Maybe.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I feel like I could go on for quite a moment with you all to discuss more on these points. However, we have to come to an end. I'm really taking from this panel, but also from the sessions, a lot of very interesting key messages I think building trust for the financial institutions was mentioned, harmonizing NDC commitments to have more transparency but also to give more attention to our ASEAN, Southeast Asia region. I heard integrated landscape finance is needed and the importance of the landscape. On the other hand, I heard that from a global perspective, it's contextualization that is needed. So we really have this clear trade-off between generalization and contextualization. It's not only carbon that counts. I think that was a good point to be made also. So not only carbon and not only CO2. And that there is a really big need for collaboration and multi-stakeholder approaches to ramp up climate smart agriculture and get from the initiative to the scale. Thank you very much to all the panelists and for those listening and also for those thinking with us and putting questions up. And I would like to give back to Ila for a quick roundup of our session 2A. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for your participation in this session of the Agroecology and Safe Food System Transitions for Green, Resilient and Inclusive Recovery in the ASEAN region. In a few seconds, we will be moving to another sub-meeting room where our speakers will be concluding the workshop. We kindly invite you to follow the link in the chat or in your participant guide to assist this concluding remark. Thank you again for your participation in this session and looking forward to seeing you at the concluding remark. Thanks.